Alrighty guys, today we're going to be taking a look at some of the big trade rumours early on heading into 2024. It might only just be the start of August, but I want to start getting a little bit more involved in the trade period, and not just that, but also the draft. So, you know, when it comes to the October, November period, I can be pretty decently invested. And if you're a subscriber, or if you're someone that hasn't yet subscribed to the channel but would like to be interested in this sort of content and want to get familiarized with the draft and trade content, then feel free to subscribe, as I'll be hoping to make a few more videos throughout the rest of the year. And also, again, with it being over 2 months away from the trade period even commencing, I'm not 100% certain at how likely any of these trades are going to be actually occurring. So it's really all speculation. Some are more likely than others, but I'm not going to have any accurate figures. I'm not going to tell you, oh yeah, this is definitely going to happen, or this is definitely not going to happen. Now, the first player we'll go over is Dan Houston, obviously at the moment playing for Port Adelaide, and he's been in some pretty good form. Had an All-Australian season last year, and once again backing up this year. Melbourne at the moment currently chasing him down at the club, despite being contracted at Port Adelaide till 2027. I believe Port Adelaide are open to trading him depending on like what the offer is at the moment, and it looks like it might be 2 first rounders. And for Melbourne, well, I'm not too sure if they're necessarily going to want to give up the 2 first rounders. Look, from this point onwards, I doubt the trade will end up happening, but at this moment, who knows, considering the Power's highest draft hand is at pick 30, you know, maybe a deal can get done later on in the season. Next up, we have Caleb Daniel. I feel like this is a pretty likely trade right now, or the talks at the moment with Daniel, because he hasn't really been getting any form right now at the Dogs. He's been out of the side, and at the moment, it just doesn't look like Luke Beveridge is wanting to select him. And I feel like the longer Daniel doesn't get selected in the Bulldogs' best 22, the more likely he's probably going to want to leave, even though Daniel himself actually says he doesn't really want to leave. He likes the playing group of the Bulldogs, but if he's getting no game time, he'll probably want to at least get a fresh start at a new club, and Daniel's a player that a lot of clubs will probably be sought after. Adelaide right now are the most interested at the moment, and considering he's from South Australia, you know, the Adelaide Crows could definitely use a player like him running off half-back with his good skills. He could be a trade possibility for Adelaide heading into 2025. Tom Barrass, another relatively big name that could possibly be heading over to Victoria this season, even though he is contracted until the end of 2027. It was initially the Dogs and the Pies wanting him down at the club, but it looks like Hawks are also wanting a piece of the pie. They still probably would have enough salary cap if they were to afford him. And also Josh Battle down back. If he does go, it probably seems like it's more likely that it's the Bulldogs, and he's also been offered 5 years from the Dogs. But I reckon right now he's probably more likely to stay at West Coast. West Coast are going to need at least to keep a few players, and Barrass is one of their best players, especially down back. Tim English is another player also possibly on the trade this season, another pretty big name player. Currently eligible for free agency heading into this trade period. It looks like West Coast is the club of interest, and it makes sense. I mean, West Coast need a genuine ruckman at their club, and he's also from WA English, and he also himself is welcome to maybe head to Perth for the lifestyle. Now, the 2 possibilities are either staying or heading to West Coast, which it looks like it'll be a 6-year contract offer. But I feel like for English right now, if you want success, you're not going to get success if you head to West Coast, and right now the Bulldogs are in some pretty good form. So I'd probably stay, but again, who knows with this one. Clayton Oliver, another player that as of late has been talked about a little bit more in terms of maybe wanting to request a trade to another club. Form at the club hasn't been the best, and it seems like there's a bit of tension and frustration built inside of Oliver with, you know, the fact that he's getting started on the bench. So he's not really happy with the way things are going right now with him and Goodwin at the Ds. He still has 6 years to go on his contract, which is worth $1.1 million a season. So if he does leave the club, the Ds would have to pay a portion of the salary, which is probably something they don't want to do. Adelaide, who are wanting to, you know, lure some bigger name players and certainly some midfielders to spark into their side, could be the front runners at the moment, and he'd definitely be a good chance of possibly heading to the Crows, especially if his tension and frustration continues at the club. Next player we have to talk about is Josh Battle. Definitely been talked about a lot more, probably as recently than some of the other players, and it looks like he's more likely to join the Hawks at this rate. And that's probably more to do with money. It's been rumoured that he's been offered over $900K at the Hawks, and that would be enough actually for Saints to gain a first-round compensation pick. But yeah, a lot of people probably don't think he's worth that much. Don't get me wrong, he's been one of St Kilda's best players this year, finding a really good roll down back. The Saints' form continues to just, you know, be impressive to finish off the season. His chances of actually leaving the club to Hawthorn might slowly go down a little bit, but at this rate, it looks like chances are he's probably going to Hawthorn. Elliot Himmelberg, another player rumoured. I was talking about him last year as a potential trade option. The deal couldn't get done, but he's once again really wanting to head over to GWS to join his brother Harry. I feel like the chances are definitely a lot higher than they were last year, even though Adelaide still do want to keep him. He's played a number of seasons now for the Crows as Himmelberg, and he's never really cemented himself as a genuine, you know, best 22 player. So for him, a fresh start might be all that's required. Another Giants player that looks to be on the move as well is Harry Perryman, one of the bigger unrestricted free agents heading into 2024. He's 25 years old, and he has an $800,000 contract for 5-year offer from the Hawks. I'm not too sure if Hawthorn are able to afford these players, but would be another big move if Hawthorn could acquire him. You know, big gets in the trade period. They do have a pretty big salary cap. At the moment, though, Perryman's just leaving his contract negotiations to his manager, just wanting to let himself play footy. And because of the numbers and all that, it would be big enough to allow the Giants to have a bit of compensation, which at the moment looks to be pick 9 if that does end up happening. Now, obviously, Bailey Smith, we all know he's leaving the Dogs at the end of the year with the ACL injury. Basically played his last game for them in 2023, and the options were either Geelong or Hawthorn, and I think as longer time goes, the more chances he's most likely going to be going to Cat. You know, it just makes the most sense that he goes to Geelong. The Cats are in need of desperate midfielders to help, you know, rejuvenate their squad. You know, he's been touring the facilities. The Cats are a destination club, and you know, they have the draft picks in hand to get to trade for him. And supposedly, you know, I think Bailey Smith may have already gotten a house in Geelong as well, so in the Geelong area. So if all that stuff is true, I don't know. Cats are the club that want him. The Cats are the club that seem to be getting him most likely. Next up, we have Chad Warner. Don't, you know, start panicking at all, Sydney fans, because at the moment he won't be moving at the end of 2024. He's contracted till 2025, but he has been talked about, not as much as of late, but certainly, you know, quite a bit in terms of wanting to head back to WA, and there are some massive offers. Let's be real, it's Chad Warner of up to $1.5 million a year from both WA clubs. Who knows what might happen at the end of 2025, you know, with Sydney's form, with how Dockers go. It looks like Dockers would be the front runner at the moment, and, you know, obviously wanting to head to a club with success, but also with all their future draft picks in hand, they'd be able to afford that. Obviously, the Swans would want him to stay, but it just depends on whether or not he does want to leave at the end of 2025. So just have a watch on that. It's not going to happen at the end of this year, but who knows. Another player that won't leave this year, but I thought I'd talk about because he's a big one, is Harley Reid. They've made it a mandatory rule now for players like Harley Reid in his caliber as a top high draft pick. They aren't able to leave the club or request to trade until the end of 2026. But I think a lot of people are probably pretty aware now that he's a good chance of wanting to head back to Victoria. That's obviously his home state, and the club most likely to probably get him, if he was at the moment going to Victoria, is Essendon, or at least that's what they've been offering, $18 million over 10 years. I think that would end up being the biggest contract offer in AFL history by far. So he'd end up being the richest AFL player of all time. Next up, we have Isaac Cumming. Will he be staying at the Giants? Will he be coming? Oh my freaking God, that didn't even make any sense. Adelaide, Port Adelaide, Fremantle and Melbourne seem to all be interested at the moment. And it's a bit of a weird one because Cumming was injured for the first part of the season. He came back. He had a really good form period. The interest went up from a lot of other clubs. And he's injured again for the rest of the season. So I'm not too sure what's going to happen. It looks like the Giants do want him to stay and are offering him up to 6 years to stay. Dylan Shields, another player who's sort of been talked about leaving the club in the last couple of years. He's obviously quite injury prone, so good luck getting him and hoping for him to last a full season. But he has come back into the squad for Essendon. And he's actually into a little bit of form, to be fair. Like in the few games back, even against St Kilda, he looked all right. And funnily enough, St Kilda seemed to be a club that might be on the lookout for a player like Dylan Shield. A little bit more midfield depth. He has got the potential, but it is a risk considering his age and considering that if he doesn't get his body right, he's just going to be a list clogger for the Saints. Now, another big name, probably the biggest name or just about, that is most likely not going to stay at the club he's at, is Dustin Martin. Now, he's another player that's been talked about probably unnecessarily too much. Like, just leave the bloke alone. A 9-year contract has finally come to an end this year, so it's either going to be for the superstar. He probably retires or he plays for Gold Coast at the end of next year. He could play for Richmond next year. That's not out of the water, but it looks like everyone's saying that's not going to happen. And people are saying he won't play for Richmond again. I've been hearing multiple rumours that he's 100% not playing for Richmond at the end of next year, so if it does happen, it'd be quite funny. If he does head to the Suns, he'll be back with Dimmer Hardwick. He'll mostly just play the home games, I think, and it'll probably just be a couple-year contract to provide experience to the Gold Coast players that hopefully can make finals. Another pretty big-name player at Richmond that could be heading out of the club at the end of the year is Shai Bolton, and this would be to WA. However, he still has 4 years left of the contract at Richmond. He's looking like he's more likely wanting to head over west, you know, to move back with family. Probably Freo might be the front runners, considering they've got quite a few picks in hand. Obviously, if Richmond have the final say, maybe a few of those draft picks might appease the Tigers. I'm not sure with Shai Bolton. He almost might be a 50-50 chance to head over. Would be a huge loss for the Tigers, but as a Tigers fan, let me know what you think of this in the comments. Matty Owies is another player that could be heading out of Carlton at the end of the year. You'd think they'd be interested in Owies, considering he's in some pretty good form. He's kicked over 26 goals so far this year. That's the third highest for the club at Carlton, and he's actually kicked more goals than Nick Larkey and he's actually kicked more goals than someone like a Cam Zurhaar over the last 2 or 3 years. So he's probably one of the more underrated small forwards in the league, and I wouldn't say there's any club right now in particular, but at the moment he's out of contract. From what I've heard, he's probably wanting to stay at Carlton, so you'd think they sign him at the end of the year. You'd think he gets a contract extension, but at the moment, he's out of contract. Maybe he wants to head over somewhere else if Carlton start playing like crap. He's a pretty handy small forward, so there'd be a number of clubs that would certainly be eyeing him down. Rory Lobb seemed almost certain to be on a move to a fourth club, let's say 1.5 months ago, but that was in May, and currently with his form, the odds of that happening seem less and less likely, and I think all Dogs fans, if I spoke to them right now, they'd be happy to keep Rory Lobb because he has turned his career around in the last month, which is reducing the likelihood of him moving by quite a bit. Collingwood were the club that were looking like most likely getting him. But as a forward, he's currently playing defence. Another Richmond player who's also considering a trade is Liam Baker, once again to WA. This is going to be a common trend, I feel like, this off-season. Now, it looks like at the moment it's a 5-year deal from both West Coast and Freo, so it's probably going to be either or at the moment. Richmond have also offered Liam Baker a long-term deal as well, but it looks like at the moment he's more likely wanting to head back home and doesn't want to stay at Richmond. Probably say it's more likely at this rate that you'll see Liam Baker out of Richmond and probably more likely at Freo than West Coast. Now, speaking of West Coast, Jake Waterman, he's been talked about a potential trade at the end of the season at the moment. Geelong seem heavily interested. Now, it would be a massive blow for West Coast if he were to leave because he's having an incredible year. He's still a chance at the Coleman. He's just been kicking bags of goals in every game he's been playing. So, clubs are certainly going to be wanting him. Geelong, considering Hawkins is at the end of his career, Cameron hasn't got heaps of time left in him, would be a pretty good player to just cement in that Geelong squad. The Cats are offering a long-term deal, and it would be at more money that he's currently getting at the Eagles, which is only, I think, less than $500,000. So his contract till the end of 2025, but if money goes up, he might be wanting to leave the club because he is interested in maybe exploring his options. And Geelong, they're always that side that just gets these big-name players. So imagine at the end of the 2024 trade period if they just acquire Jake Waterman out of nowhere. I would believe that at least for the next year he stays at West Coast, but we'll see what happens. And the final player we have is Jack Graham, which once again continues the amount of Richmond players wanting to leave the club given their form, and another player that's really open to a move to WA. He's an unrestricted free agent, which again means that the Tigers don't have the final say, and if he wants to leave, he'll be able to leave. I think it looks like Freo and West Coast both want him. I'm not too sure exactly what club yet, but as this has been one of the more recent talking points, it looks like at this point of time, this is probably the most likely of all deals to happen. It's looking like it's almost a 100% lock of happening, barring something major with what Richmond wants. And that'll conclude all the trades I have right now for this video, but clearly there'll be a whole lot more rumours popping up over the next month or two, which is always quite exciting, seeing what players could be on the way out. If you guys enjoyed, and by enjoyed, I mean if you've learnt something new, and hit that like button if this helped you stay on top of the trade period just a little bit and you learned something you didn't know. I just realized the graphics aren't there on the screen anymore, so I can head back to the center of the frame. But that'll be it for me. That's it for the video. Once again, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you very soon for some more content in the next one.